Good morning, class. I'm Miss S. Today we're going to be doing a science lesson, so let's get started. Does anyone know how scientists solve problems? Yes,
They do experiments.
You're right, they do. But they can't just come into work one day and immediately start on an experiment. They have to do background stuff before they can actually start. So, does anyone know how they decide what they're going to test in these experiments?
No, I'm not sure how.
All right, well, that's what we're going to talk about today. When a scientist has an idea that they think might be for a good experiment, they create a hypothesis around it. So, does anyone know exactly what a hypothesis is?
Isn't it like a question?
Kind of. Yeah, you're right. All right, so it's a proposition made as a basis for reasoning without any assumption of its truth. I know, it sounds tricky, right? But in reality, it's really more like a really educated guess. So, why is this important to science? Well, has anyone heard of the scientific method? Okay, well, for those of you who haven't necessarily heard of it or don't really remember, we'll do a quick refresher. There are 6 steps to the scientific method. You make an observation, form a question, form a hypothesis, conduct an experiment, analyze the data, and from that you can draw conclusions. So the hypothesis, as you can see, is a really big step in the scientific method, which is how you test things in science. So, your hypothesis essentially becomes the testable explanation in the experiment. Does that make sense? Cool. Let's move on. Are there any questions?
No.
All right, so let's talk about how you create the actual hypothesis. There are 3 important steps. 1, you need to ask a question. 2, you need to do your background research. And 3, from that, you can create a hypothesis. We start by asking a question so that you have an idea of what it is that you're going to be testing. Then you do background research to see if anyone else has done similar studies and what they might have found. Then you make an informed guess on what you believe might be the outcome of your experiment. From that, you have your hypothesis. So there are some tips to writing a really good hypothesis. You want to write with clear and simple language. You don't want it to be confusing. You want to make sure it's testable, so it's not something that you won't be able to collect data for. And 3, you want to do your research, because if someone else has done a similar study, you want to look at their conclusion and edit or adjust your hypothesis to include the most current research. Let's think of some examples. Let's try it out. So for instance, let's think of 2 things that might have a relationship to each other, like sugar and cavities. So you could create a hypothesis from those 2 things. That's if you eat a lot of sugary foods and candy, you're more likely to get cavities. So that's testable, clear, simple, makes sense, right? Seems pretty simple. Do you guys think you could try it?
Yeah.
All right, let's try. Dylan, do you have 2 things that you think might have a relationship?
Yeah, I have a pet plant at home, and my mom always says that it needs light.
Okay, so from that, what would you say is a hypothesis statement? Because remember, it's always a statement, not a question.
I guess the less light a plant gets, the slower it grows.
Perfect. Let's try another. Lexa, are there 2 things you think might have a relationship?
Maybe temperature and the leaves changing colors.
Amazing. So what would a hypothesis for that sound like?
Maybe leaves change color when it gets colder.
Awesome. Great, guys. You really got it down. So when you need to make hypotheses later in life, just remember the ABCs of writing a hypothesis. Ask a question, background research, and creating your hypothesis. Does that make sense, everyone? Do you think you got it down?
Yeah.
Seems
Awesome.
simple enough.
So, to help you remember the ABCs of creating a hypothesis, I've written a little song that's really catchy so that you can use it anytime you need to do this. It goes like this. A, B, C, as easy as 1, 2, 3. Let's create a hypothesis. 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. Come on, you and me now. You have to ask a question and then do your background research to create a hypothesis. 1, 2, 3, A, B, C. Come on, you and me now.